This podcast is sponsored by Bigger Brains, online training that won't bore you to tears. Expand the minds of your workforce at getbiggerbrains.com.
Welcome to Permission to Speak, the video blog and podcast that loiters at the intersection of leaders who want their people to speak up, technology that facilitates connections, and results that serve our higher purpose. Now, here's your host, Kelly Vandever.
Hi, this is Kelly Vandever. Welcome to the podcast. I am delighted to have with me today Charlene Li. She is the founder and CEO of Altimeter Group. She's the author of the New York Times bestseller, Open Leadership, and co-author of the critically acclaimed bestseller, Groundswell. Her most recent book came out in March of this year, 2015. It's called The Engaged Leader, A Strategy for Digital Transformation. I happen to have my copy right here, and you can see all the highlights and writings in the margins. I'm a big fan. It's a great book. Charlene is one of the foremost experts on social media and technology. She's a consultant and independent thought leader on leadership, strategy, and social technologies. She was named one of the 100 most creative people by Fast Company and is frequently quoted by leading media channels such as The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, USA Today, Reuters, and the Associated Press. She has appeared on 60 Minutes, The McNeil NewsHour, ABC News, CNN, and CNBC. She's a much sought-after public speaker and has keynoted top conferences such as the World Business Forum, World Economic Forum, American Society of Association Executives, South by Southwest, Web 2.0, and I had the pleasure of seeing her earlier this year at Digital Summit in Atlanta. So welcome, Charlene.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's awesome to have you. We like to start out our little podcast here with a couple of questions for you. So a couple of quirky questions to let the audience get to know you a little bit better. So the first question I'd like to ask is for you to tell us your favorite guilty pleasure TV show.
Oh, that's an easy one. I love Survivor. I watch it every week when it's in season with my husband and sometimes my kids. And we just love talking about it because it shows the base human nature, but also all the good things that can come out of people too. So it's just fun and guilty, and I love it. I don't miss a single episode.
Now, have you had, I have a fantasy about actually competing on Survivor?
Yes, but I think my husband and I would rather do The Amazing Race. But,
really?
Yeah, we just kind of like that part. It would just be really fun. And we're both also Harvard Business School grads, so I think we would freak out people. We'd play the aggressive people, but the real secret is that HBS grads are really nice and we work really well together. So probably win, not because we're cutthroat, but because we know how to work in teams.
Very cool.
All about alliances. This is how you win these things.
Well, and I'm sure that's part of the whole Survivor piece, right?
Exactly. Can't do it alone.
Well, and that's true of any leader, right?
Exactly.
Okay, well, the second quirky question is tell us something surprising about yourself that most people don't know.
I think the most surprising thing is that I was a varsity athlete in college and actually competed in the NCAA finals in sailing. So
really?
I'd only done summer camp sailing before college, and this one guy in my freshman dorm says, "Hey, I'm going up for the sailing team. You want to do it?" And everybody in my dorm was a jock, and I was anything but. I was a classically trained pianist. I did everything not to do sports. I'm like, I can sail. And I got thrown into a boat, really enjoyed it, found that I was actually really good, and competed for 3 solid years. In my senior year, got to race in the NCAA champions for collegiate sailing, varsity sailing.
That is amazing. That is so cool. Now, you may not know this about my background, but I was actually in the Navy for several years, and I did the sailing thing as part of one of the. I'm not good at the. I'm not good at it. That is very impressive. Impressive. Okay, the next question is a little more serious, and we would like to know what your story is. what happened in your life that got you to this place that you started to care about this digital transformation, about employees having a voice?
Well, the whole point of employees having a voice was later on in my career, but where it started was I came out of business school thinking I wanted to do something in this internet space. And this is 1993. There was no World Wide Web. Just to give some context how long ago this was. And I realized I wanted to do something in the content space. I didn't know anything about telecom, and hardware and software was beyond me, but I knew something about content, and I gravitated towards newspapers because I figured this would be the first thing that goes online. It has the area that made the most sense, the content that made the most sense for the internet, whatever it was going to be.
Right.
And I also like the mission of what newspapers do, which is to bring a community together. It serves a community, and it gives voice to the people who are in the hidden parts of our society. And that's the role of journalism, is to be able to find the truth out there and be that objective voice. And so I wanted to be able to find a way to give voice to the many members of the community. So I put towns online, not newspapers. And from there, I realized that the real opportunity for the internet was to give people voice, to really allow people to connect with each other. It's not about big boxes and retailers selling more stuff. This is going to fundamentally change relationships. And so as my whole entire focus has always been about how technology can shift the balance of power. And that's where true disruption comes from. And one of the most interesting places is inside of organizations. How do you actually change the balance of power inside an organization without toppling the entire organization itself? And so my senior thesis in college was all about declining dictators and how dictators are overthrown. So it kind of came full loop in terms of where people power came from. I studied the Iranian Revolution and the Philippines Revolution, and how do you harness that? So seeing that play over and over again, and how we have these sort of mini revolutions, it oftentimes feels like a revolution instead of organizations. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about it, but I think in many ways what we're going through is a complete digital transformation of organizations today. It's been something that's been happening for decades. And now, because of a time of circumstance, technology, social, mobile, and cloud, we actually can see very, very new ways of working, readily available, and more importantly, leadership that is open to it.
Well, and so that brings me kind of to one of the things that I've wondered about or haven't figured out is the IBM survey of CEOs talked about 75% of CEOs say the number one most important characteristic of the successful employee in the future is collaboration, number one. But when Gallup did their research, they found only 30% of employees are engaged. And I think that those two things go together, and you can't have somebody collaborative if they're not really engaged. So where do you think the disconnect is, based on your research, based on what you've worked with the companies that you've worked with?
I think fundamentally what people want, what they say they want, and what they actually get and feel they want to get are two very different things. And I think there's a big difference between collaboration and engagement, especially the way that Gallup defines engagement. Collaboration means you work better together, and instead of hiding in your silos, you actually share information. You don't put yourself first. You're not being protectionist. You're moving faster. There's all these positive things around that. But they don't talk about engagement, because you can do all of those things and still not be engaged. You can work with other people and break things down, but because you have to, not because you want to. And I think engagement, that you can go through the motions of collaboration and never be engaged. Engagement is really a mindset that says, do I feel in line and supported by the organization to achieve the same goal? Am I engaged in the same purpose and mission and live the values of my organization? And I think fundamentally that requires a very different type of relationship than just merely collaboration. It says, I will put my heart and soul, my mind, everything into the success of this organization. I'm truly engaged in what we're trying to do. I am happy and more than happy and satisfied. I am actively engaged. Now, if you've ever met an engaged person, they're not just doing their job. They're looking for ways to make it better, to do things, if they don't think that you're doing it the best way, they're going to speak up.
Right.
And I think a major reason why employees are not engaged is that, frankly, a lot of companies don't want them to be. They just want them to do their job, not cause any problems. Don't raise up other ways to do things. Just don't bring up any more ideas. Just do your job, okay? And you get this message over and over again. Don't cause any problems. Don't raise up ideas because, there's no funding for it anyways. Yeah, come up with a new idea, but it's going to go through an innovation committee. And you just kind of go, ugh, how excited can I get about that? How engaged can I get about that? So I don't think they're necessarily separate. That I think in many ways, organizations leaders aren't thinking really what kind of relationship do they want with their employees. And it is this area called followership. I mentioned it very briefly in the book, is what kind of follower do you want? Do you want somebody who blindly follows you? Just follows your commands and, you can yank them back in with the reins to stay on that course? Or do you want somebody who says, I see what you're saying with this course, but I really think that's a better way to go. Mm-hmm. And where you listen, where they have faith that you will actually listen to them and engage them with you. Two very, very different things.
So what do you think, you say leaders haven't really given it thought about the relationship that they want with their employees? I think they've given some thought into, this is the way I feel comfortable leading, and this is the kind of relationship I have and want. But they haven't said, this is a different way to do it, and how would I lead in a very different way potentially? And is it a new and different way, especially being able to use some of these new digital tools to be able to allow you to do this at scale? A major reason why you couldn't do this is that your span of control was fairly limited. You could only influence the people who were in direct visual sight of you. So there are lots of things where, your span of control is really between, 7 people to be effective. If you really want to extend it, maybe 15, but you're going to be pulling your hair out. Well, what if your span of control was 150 or 15,000 or 150,000, 1.5 million, all your customers? And you can do that, maybe not at the same level, but you can still inspire them to follow you. And it's a very different type of leadership, I think, than most people usually think of, because they're thinking again of being able to see somebody, shake their hand or give them a slap on the back and say, hey, are we good? We're good, right? We're good. Yeah.
And this is a very different way. How do you have that sense we're good in the digital space? And then how do you do it at scale? And so I'm asking leaders to do what they've always done very, very well, which is to lead. Now, lead the same way you have been, with the same spirit, but what you have to do now is extend it through these digital channels, and it does require you to do things differently.
Well, and I think you do a nice job of laying out how a leader can do that, and that there are different ways to do that. I think you're one of the things I think that as executives would think as they're reading your book is, okay, she's not telling me I'm a loser because I'm not doing it a particular way, but that you give options and examples of different ways that people have done that.
Right. Well, one thing in particular, to that point, I am perfectly fine with the leader saying, I don't like any of these digital things. They just do not help me achieve my goals. And I am perfectly fine with them saying that, but only if they've gone through the exercise of saying, here are my goals. Hey, how could I use any of these digital tools to help me achieve my goals? If they've gone through the exercise and really thought deeply about it and just said, it's not the thing for me to do. I had the chance to talk to Ginny Ramaday. I opened the book with her and I had a chance to talk with her just last week.
Right.
And I said, so still not on Twitter, right? And she goes, no, she says, I can't be authentic in that channel. It's not the place where I need to be and want to be to accomplish my goals, so why should I use it? My focus is completely on the internal. I can do my videos, I can engage with people in my jams, and that's where I have a lot of passion because it's in complete alignment with what I'm trying to get done. The epitome of an engaged leader, because she knows where that engagement is going to matter. She has systematically thought through what you will do and won't do, and that is a strategy. A strategy is what you will do and won't do to achieve your goals. And she goes, yes, on the internal collaboration, the video, and the discussion boards, no to Twitter.
Right, right.
Brilliant.
Well, if there's an executive, there's a leader that's watching this, and they say to themselves, "Okay, I've ordered the book. It hasn't come in yet, but I think I want a different relationship. I want a richer, more connected relationship with folks." One of the things that you talk about in the Engaged Leader is this idea of polished versus being imperfect. That you don't have to be the Superman, the Superwoman to, in fact, that doesn't connect as authentically. Can you talk about that some more? Maybe give any examples?
Sure. I think one of the biggest issues is that in the past, our opportunities connect with people who are following us, especially if you're leading a large organization, were very far and few between. And so you did have to make it perfect. You did have to make it polished because you only had a chance once a year or once a quarter to align everybody around everything. So you wanted to be sure that every single word counted, every nuance, every flick of a hand or look or a wink or whatever it is, communicated something. I mean, I'm not kidding you. It's that polished, right? You've seen it all. Our leaders just like stress over every single wording of how it's going to be perceived and come across. But if you change that and you talk to your team every single day, multiple times a day, well, that's a different type of relationship then. It's something that's much more constant, and as a result, it's going to be much more fluid. You don't have the time to make it perfect every single time, but you also know that because the relationship is very different, that if things aren't perceived the right way, somebody will say back to you probably, that sounded kind of odd. What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Or you're not being clear. Can you please give that some more? And that contradicts that. Can you tell me why that is? They always, frankly, no matter how perfect and polished your piece was before, they still ask the same questions. Now here, they actually have a chance. You have a chance to clarify. You have a chance to engage with them. If there are any points of contention, it immediately bubbles up. You immediately see it. There is no room for things being left unsaid if you do this right. And the question becomes, do you as a leader want that kind of relationship? Because frankly, a lot of leaders I've spoken to don't. They're not comfortable with it. They're not comfortable with it offline in their real life as a leader. And if they're not comfortable with that kind of relationship in the real world, they're never going to be comfortable with it in the digital world.
Yeah.
So what you're really seeing, the reluctance to be engaged in the digital space, is just pure and simple, the reluctance to be engaged.
Interesting.
I've never seen a leader who was kind of standoffish in real life be able to just all of a sudden just turn it on, be authentic in the digital space. It's always somebody they were like this anyways, and it's just the most natural thing for them to be doing this in the digital world at all. It just they just don't skip a beat.
Interesting. Okay. Well, what about that middle manager, that person that's working for one of those authentic, willing to engage, kind of out there, the epitome of the engaged leader that you talk about, and they're not used to that kind of engagement. They're not used to the fact that their employees are directly communicating with the CEO of the company. And they're very uncomfortable. They work very hard to get to that level of their management. What thoughts, what advice do you have for those folks?
It's brutally hard because they've worked for 10, 15, 20 years. They finally got the office. They're managing a team or a team of teams. They finally made it, right? And then the rug gets pulled up from under them. No, you thought you were in control. You're not anymore. So I really feel for them. And I have this thing that I put in open leadership that the key thing to being a leader in this new digital era, to be an open leader, is to give up the need to be in control.
Amen.
And figure out how you can inspire people to achieve goals. And I think the key thing here is to not be in control, but be in command. Those are two very different things.
Talk about that.
I think control is this mental space that people are going to do what I tell them to. Well, do it. Versus commanding says, it may sound somewhat similar, but it says that I have so much confidence in my team. When I ask them to go do something they don't want to do, they believe in me, and I can inspire them to do like the most horrendous things that they don't want to do, but they'll do it because they trust me and believe in me. They believe in my leadership. And that's the essence of true command, where everybody is just terrified. They don't know how to do it. They don't want to do it. And you're able to lead them into that battle. And it is the hardest thing in the world to do. Do you have that kind of relationship and trust with people? And that's a very different type of relationship than controlling somebody out of fear and forcing them to do something they don't want to do. And I think in many ways, command is such a better way to think about it. And it's not command in sort of like, I will push the button and you will do this. It says it's more of, when I ask you to do something, it's going to happen. And you're going to do it out of respect and out of inspiration. Very different type of command.
And would you say that's based on a relationship that's built over time? Or do you think part of that is the presence or the charisma of the leader?
I think it's a relationship built over time. And you can take the most charismatic leaders, and the reason why they're charismatic is they're able to use their presence to make every person feel like they're the only person in the room. You know, so we have charismatic leaders like Bill Clinton and President Obama, and people who have met them in person just feels like the rest of the room just disappears and you have tunnel, it's just you and him. That's it. That's the charisma. And the reason why they have that in spades is because they truly are deeply interested in what you as a person have to say at that moment. And they're able to make people feel this way. And I go back to the best leaders are the ones who make us feel really special, really validated. Like the whole room just fades away and I'm the only person and I feel listened to, that my voice mattered.
Yeah.
And when we've all had that kind of leader in our lives. These are the people who inspired us. Could be a teacher, could be a coach, could be your current boss right now. But we all have had these leaders, and we always remember how they made us feel.
Right.
And I think the challenge for the engaged leader today is that you have to be able to figure out how to inspire that kind of feeling. Whatever feeling it is that you are trying to achieve in your leadership practice. What is it? How would you want people to describe you as a leader? How do you make them feel? And you can't do this only face to face. How do you do it now in the digital space? And we don't talk about feelings oftentimes. We don't talk about emotions when it comes to digital. And yet I think that is the fundamental aspect of these new relationships is how does digital transform relationships in a way that we couldn't do them before? So I look at issues around scale, but also around diversity, being able to have different voices raised up. And technology can be a huge benefit from that because you can't tell who's a woman who's Black and Hispanic inside many of these forums. It's mainly about the ideas. It's really about the inspiration and who follows whom. Yeah. And so I find it technology in many ways so optimistic, like a Star Trek kind of that it can be the great equalizer. It can be. It's not the only thing, but it can, if used in the right way, can be profoundly impactful.
Very cool. Very cool. So who are you mentioned the CEO of IBM, but who else are some of your heroes in this space that you really admire how they've approached their engagement?
I look at David Thodey, who's he's the outgoing CEO of Telstra, which is the largest telecom company in Australia. And people have told me, he's pretty different. He's pretty unique. He's an anthropology major. He's just, he's kind of wired differently. And he totally is. He's, very engaged. He realized that the company needed to be much more customer-centric. So everything became customer-centric. It's about how do you change the entire culture of an organization. And more importantly, he realized the importance of digital. And so while he would hold digital summits every single year. And he started engaging people internally. So they put in a Yammer, an enterprise social network, and he started participating in it. And he just threw out this bombshell. Team, he wrote to every single employee saying, name your top 10 processes that we should get rid of. And I was speaking to his lieutenant, Robert Mason, just this past week. And he's like, oh, yeah, he goes, I have to admit, it's kind of challenging. It's often very challenging to work with somebody like David. He goes, because I was the person who had to go implement all those 10 changes. But imagine if you were an employee and they got 700 responses in the first hour.
Wow.
Post.
Wow.
How do you think as an employee you felt at that point?
Absolutely.
You felt amazing. You're like, oh my goodness, somebody now gets it. We're going to finally get rid of these things that is just horrible.
Right.
Made my life miserable. You just kind of go, ugh. And my voice mattered. Right. And I asked David, because he does these things and he answers customer care questions on Twitter. I asked him, this is a good use of your time. Really? You're the CEO. You're doing customer care on Twitter. And he says, this is something that's dear to my heart. And if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? Who else is going to lead this? If you want to be customer-centric, if you want to be digital, you better start with me. Or else how do I have credibility?
Right. But wow, I can imagine being his lieutenant. And what the heck did you just do?
Happen all the time.
You also mentioned in the book the example of from Aetna, Mark
Bertolini.
Thank you. Would you mind sharing that example? Because I think it speaks to some of the biggest fears of the executive that is considering being engaged socially.
Sure. So Mark is the head of Aetna, big proponent of healthcare reform, and a big user of Twitter. He's a self-professed geek. He has a Tumblr blog. He's on Twitter. He loves this technology stuff. And he had a Twitter account. So this one medical student in Arizona was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And he reached his lifetime limits in terms of the benefits he could receive. And so he started thinking, well, this is ridiculous. I mean, what do I do? So he started doing a tweet storm, basically, and copying not just Aetna, but also Mark. And Mark worked with his team and said, I think I need to respond to him because it's starting to get a little bit loud. His voice is getting very loud. And he doesn't understand, we're just the back-end provider. It's really his university that put those caps on. So he started trying to explain those things, and it didn't go well. And he went back and said, I've got to take a human approach to this. How would I answer him? Instead of throwing the policy book at him, I'm going to say to him, I hear you. Let's get on the phone and talk about this. And because he took that approach, and he said, look, clearly you're upset about this, and something's wrong. We got to figure this out. And they talked about it, and they decided to cover his care. They said, this is one of those glitches in policy. This is not the way it should be. And the concern is, well, first of all, you're going down the wrong path. Should you be doing this? And the whole entire PR department was like going, oh my gosh, what's he doing? Stop doing that. And so, but he knows what he can and can't say. He knew that he was kind of digging himself into a hole. But I think it comes out as a shining example of he had the guts. And he had the leadership to be able to say, I know what the right thing to do here. I know what it means to lead in this space. And we're going to do this. This is the thing that we will do. This is the right thing that we should be doing. And you just don't see that sort of clarity of thought, that presence of mind to be able to go and take these kinds of actions. This is like, okay, got to call in the PR firm and the advisors and get everybody around the room and tell them what to do.
Right.
I have to lead. And where Mark led at that moment was from his deep experience as a leader, but also as a patient. I mean, he's been through horrendous. He's broken his back. His son had horrible, debilitating diseases, leukemia. I mean, it just went on. He was speaking from the place of being a patient himself. And I thought that was the most fascinating part about this, is that he was incredibly human about it. And that's what came across. Yeah, he had to go and talk, till the CEO Aetna line, but he could do it in a very human way.
Well, so what's the rest of the story? What's happened since the book has been published there? I don't know if that's a fair question to ask.
It's a fine question. One of the biggest problems with having a book is that it's a book.
Right.
You can't edit it. Yeah. And so I included in there an FAQ section. And one of the new pieces of content I developed was really around the excuses that executives give for not wanting to do this. And so I came up with 6 very common things that people do and say. And I'm sorry, my phone is going off.
Oops.
And the thing for me, more than anything else, they have things like, I don't have time, right? It's marketing's job, or it's one of my favorites is, it's not about me. And nobody wants to hear what I have for lunch. And I go, I absolutely couldn't agree more. Nobody cares what you have for lunch. They want to know what you talked about over lunch. And so all these excuses that people would give me, I mean, I would be talking about the book and they just come back with excuses. And now if I could add another chapter or something, I would like put all these things in there. And so there's that. I continue to do research. I'm looking at employee engagement, continue to do that, employee advocacy in particular, and thinking about what my next book will be. You know, I figure I'm going to have 5 more books in my career. So I got to kind of space them out, but think about, what are the questions I want to explore? And I'm still very keen on how do you create disruptive organizations? So instead of fearing being disruptive, how do you actually sow dissension and disruption and keep everybody just a little bit kind of on edge so that we go a little bit faster? There's nothing like being chased by wolves to make you faster, right? So how do you have that edge, that competitive edge inside an organization when you're a big, huge organization?
Right.
When you're no longer just a founder and a bunch of people with being scrappy.
Right.
How do you do that? How do you maintain it? How do you create a culture of that? And I do believe it's not a strategy issue. I do believe it's a leadership and culture issue. And the role that technology can play in changing cultures very, very quickly, I think is something that I really want to explore because, goodness, I mean, do you have time in this competitive landscape to take 5 years to change your culture? No, you don't. How do you change your culture, literally, figuratively, overnight, to be much more innovative and disruptive and fast-moving?
So how do you balance disruption in a healthy way with a fear-based culture where it's not a healthy how do we keep up with people, but it's a disruptive kind of nobody's functioning and doing the best things because they're worried about their jobs or whatever.
And I think that's the key thing. There has to be in a disruptive organization, there have to be assurances that if you're disrupted out of your job, we will take care of you. And I'm not talking about take care of you for the rest of your life, but you will know 6 months in advance. We will help you find that next job. We will not leave you hanging. We will do our best, but we'll also, in order to do that, we need to know you're doing your best to help make this a success. And that's the only way it works. If you want people to make a commitment to you, you have to make a commitment to them. At Altimeter, this always doesn't work, but I say it to people all the time, even whether they believe you or not. I say, we talk about the day you leave, the day you start. And the philosophy is, I know you're going to leave at some point. I mean, the reality is that, right? I mean, people don't stay at their jobs forever. And so why do we dance around that? Let's talk about what would be the circumstances that you would leave. It's probably because you're no longer growing, or the job has changed, or we have changed as a company. So let's talk constantly. How is the fit? Are you getting what you can do? Can we meet your needs? And if we can't, then my promise is I will help you find the next job that will be a fantastic fit for you, because my relationship with you is not for the time period of our employment. It is for the rest of our lives. And even though you're not an employee, you will refer people to me. At some point, we might actually do work together again. Why wouldn't I invest in that relationship? So I'm playing the long game. When I hire somebody and bring them onto the team, I'm playing a long game. And I'm asking them to play the long game with me. And that's the only way I believe you can live with this very loaded word called integrity. How can you have integrity in your employee relationship when they're lurking around you, looking for another job without telling you and then give you notice? As a small company, 2 weeks notice just kills me.
Oh, yeah.
It's devastating. It's not nearly enough time to transfer knowledge and everything. And so, to some extent we're successful, other times not, but I would like to have that kind of relationship with the people I work with.
So you started it when you started the company. That was part of your mindset going in.
It was. Well, I think I actually developed it over time. And more than anything else, because the people who were attracting is just amazing. And I couldn't believe that they would actually want to work with me. And I just feel so blessed. Someone asked me, what's the best part about running your own company? Is the fact that you have all this control. You can do the thing that you want to do. I'm like, if anything, and any leader and any entrepreneur in particular will tell you, this is like the worst thing you could do if you want control is to start a company, because you are responsible for making sure that every single one of these people get a paycheck so that they can put food on their table. And because of that, you're always serving them. The best part of starting my own company is I have a chance to say, these are the values I want to live by. These are the values that I want to run a company by. And I feel so privileged that I work with people who share the same values.
And do you think part of that is your hiring? You make sure that you evaluate that before they ever come to work, or that they got to be on board with that?
The very first interview talks about values. So we do value screening right from the very get-go. And this is not about culture and fit. This is, if you had to make tough decisions, how do you make them? Give us examples where you really had to apply values. Not do you have these values, but apply them.
Yeah.
Tough situations, margin calls. So integrity, if you think of it as so simple, but we define it as, do we have a trust-based relationship with each other? And that begins with giving feedback. So we ask the example, give us an example where you had to give feedback to somebody, but you really didn't want it to do it, right? And you knew that the person didn't want to hear it. How did you give that feedback? Because if you have something in between, then you're not living in integrity with each other. Yeah. And you have to have that in a small organization. You have to have open communications in that way. Right? So it was a really interesting thing, talk about how do you empower somebody when you don't trust them?
Right.
How did you figure out that you could trust them? Because empowerment is one of our biggest areas. It means basically you have to you're comfortable letting people fail. Yeah. You're comfortable admitting that you failed. So empowerment means failure. So how comfortable you feel. So we have all these different ways to test around the values. And it's really hard to hide from that. And you don't have to have had lots of years of experience. I mean, I do these things with kids. Have you ever had to tell somebody that their dress was ugly? Or what do you do when, a parent comes and aunt says, oh, how do you like my dress? And you really think it's ugly. What do you say? Right? And there are all these nuances. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's how do you use your values to help make decisions? And we just want to see how people think about that. And more than anything else, we want to see that they've thought about it. So I think that's the key.
Do you find that some of the larger companies that you're working with have that same kind of mindset, that they, especially obviously the people closest to them, they want to know that they do share the same values, that they can buy into the why of the organization?
We've heard from quite a few of our clients that the reason, because we do the reviews, we ask them, why do you hire us? And clearly it's the research and everything, but there are lots of smart people in the world. And frequently what they say to us is, we really like your culture, we like your values, you really live your values. And if you have a choice of smart people to work with, but one you just like better because they share the same values and they work the same way as you and have the same culture. Culture is about how you get work done. And the way that we would things get done, you could see how collaborative and respectful we were, and we would carry that from our internal relationship into the client relationship too. I can't tell you how many times people tell us that over and over again. And every time they tell us that, we get kind of surprised. But of course, that would make sense. But it's just not something that we necessarily do. And now we do. We say one of the distinguishing factors that we have are our values and our culture.
Very good. And do you think that they are able to do that with their own staffs too? I mean, they are making this decision to bring you in, but what about their own people?
I think, for the stakeholders who have done this, it's very important to them and they've done it. I think it's really hard for companies to do this over and over again. The one company I think who does this very admirably is LinkedIn. Jeff Weiner, the CEO, I kind of joke about it. I feel like every time I see him, I just push the button. Our purpose and mission is to put members first, because Every single time I see him, I swear. It's just a matter of a few minutes before it'll show up. Well, at LinkedIn, our purpose is to put members first. And then he uses that as a way to explain everything. And once asked him, are you ever going to stop talking about this? And he says, I'll stop talking about it when the look of surprise, people go, oh yeah, that's right. When they're actually bored, they go, yeah, we know that, Jeff. When they stop acting surprised, like, oh, I didn't know that's right. That's a good reminder. We got to put members first. Yeah. He goes, when people aren't surprised anymore and they're bored by me saying this, then I'll stop. He goes, day hasn't come yet.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. That's a really good observation. So do you think, so changing gears, as you look to that next book, as you look to what's the new disruptor, do you think it's that disruptive organization? Is that the thing that leaders have to keep looking out for in the future? Or is there something else that you say, you're not paying attention to this now, but it's going to sneak up on you?
Well, I think from a technology point of view, because we've been talking so much about organizations, I think one of the most fascinating technologies that's here right now, you don't have to look very far in the future, are messaging apps. And so people kind of look at Snapchat and WhatsApp and don't take them seriously because it's kind of a teenager millennial thing. There are as many people using messaging apps as social networks. 2.2 billion people in the world. They are exactly the same number right now. And the trajectory curve is very clearly, it's very clear who's going to be winning that race. It's the messaging apps. And I think in many ways, how do you use them as an internal communication tool? Is something it's completely not explored at all. I don't see a single company thinking, okay, how do I use WhatsApp as a collaboration tool? Something like a messaging app in that way. And then you have all the branding opportunities around that. How do you brand inside of a messaging app? And companies are starting to figure that out. I think, again, it's one of those things that we just completely dismissed and said, that doesn't matter. Because it's like it's this crazy tool thing that nobody uses, right? No. It's the same number of people as social networks. Same number.
Wow.
And people don't realize that. And it's here right now, today.
So what do you predict? So what should they be doing?
I think more than anything else, you go and see what companies like McDonald's are putting up. Basically, it's a very viral space. It's a great publishing tool. It's great for sending out and having people put you into the queue for messaging, add you to a group as a brand, and you can send messages. And the reason why people love them is not an inbox. I don't have to delete things. I just read it and it's gone. Like low maintenance. And if I don't want to read any of them, I just kind of go through them. It's so much easier. It's even better than a stream because I can have all these different groups and everything. It's not one single stream. I can add things and group them together, and it's so much easier. So I could put all of my department store messaging app into one place. And when I'm ready to see that, I can just go through it. And if I don't like it, I don't have to think about it.
Right.
But it's just like, top of mind kind of stuff. Cool little content pieces here and there. Right. So it's a very different type of relationship, and it's highly viral because I can just share something. Like, oh, that's a really cool offer. I'm going to share it back to my friends, my regular channel.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's a variation on social networking and social media sites and channels. But brands are completely blind to the opportunity there, I think.
Interesting. Well, to just kind of wrap us back around and kind of how we started, your mission coming out of business school was to give people a voice to serve community. How's that going?
I think pretty well. I think more than anything else, the one area that I'm starting to venture into, and you heard me talk about it a little bit in Atlanta, is I'm finding my own voice. And as a woman, Asian, sort of in the tech space, entrepreneur, in a leadership space, and really getting comfortable talking about diversity, especially in the leadership space. And there's so much focus on it right now in the tech area and the lack of it. And one of the things I talk about is, as growing up, I didn't have any role models. There were no role models, people who looked like me. And I feel a tremendous responsibility for me to develop and own my own voice in this. So you talk about the journey. I feel like my entire career has been giving other people voices on this. And Granted, I have a very strong voice myself, but it's always been advising people on what to do, and it has been turned towards me. And so what I had to feel comfortable was that whole thing, it's not about me. The excuse, it is not about me. But people want to know what my journey has been. And they want to know, and I have the opportunity, and I think frankly now, the responsibility to use my platform that I have and make that voice as loud as possible.
Well, that's a great way to end it. Charlene, thank you again for joining us. We so appreciate it. And I can't wait to see what the future holds for you and for the world.
Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by Bigger Brains, online training that won't bore you to tears. Expand the minds of your workforce at getbiggerbrains.com. To find out more about Charlene Li and her books, check out her website, charleneli.com. To find out more about the Altimeter Group and their work, go to altimetergroup.com. Since this recording, Altimeter Group has joined forces with an organization called Profit. To learn about Altimeter Group's acquisition, go to profit.com/promo/Altimeter Group. Thanks for tuning in to Permission to Speak. If you want to increase collaboration and innovation in your organization, check out more resources available at speakingpractically.com or give me a call, Kelly Vandever, at 770-597-1108.